Before I started playing Into the Radius, everyone said it was a Stalker and Metro love child, and I have to agree, 110% is. I think it takes a lot of the military, weaponry and stuff like that from the Stalker series, and just the kind of atmosphere from the Stalker series. However, I think when it comes to its horror elements, it takes more from the Metro series. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not just these two games. It 110% offers unique mechanics that make it its own, but throughout this review, you will start to understand why a lot of people compare this to the Stalker and Metro series. Now, for me, the horror is just amazing. Now, I'm not a big horror person, but they do it really well here. It's a lot of psychological and atmospheric horror where you actually get to defend yourself rather than some horror games or horror experiences in games that it's only scary because you are unable to defend yourselves. So that being said, we're going to go into a deep dive on everything about Into the Radius, and hopefully by the end of it, you'll understand why my white pants turned brown. So at the very start, there is an introduction tutorial like any game. However, I do feel that the Into the Radius tutorial actually gives you a great understanding of the atmosphere that you're going to feel in the game without putting you in any actual danger within that tutorial. The introduction to the mechanics, as well as the overall feeling that you have, definitely comes through and says, look, this is how you are going to be feeling when you don't necessarily feel completely safe in this game. And they show off the different mechanics like looting, the weapons, the tools that you'll be using to clean your weapons, and really kind of give that overall, we are getting you into this world and you should be pretty prepared, or at least have a pretty good understanding on the bare minimums of how this world operates. While I do want to talk about the story, I do not want to go into too much detail, so I'm going to kind of give you an overview. You're a UNPSC volunteer who has lost their memory and is researching what is going on in the Radius. You go out on missions, bring things back, bring back information, and give it to scientists who are trying to understand why the Radius is the way that it is and why it works the way that it works. And the story is given to you in a few different ways. The first way being voice recordings that you listen to on your, tape recorder. The next way is through messages via notes that are in the world, as well as given to you at the end of main story missions, and people. And when I say people, I'm not talking about the enemies that you fight. I'm talking about the people that have some sort of a black silhouette, as you see above here. Sometimes when you break these silhouettes, they speak about what's going on or what's happening around them at the time that everything happened. So, for me, I think that this is a very unique way to deliver story through voice recordings as well as these fragments. I'm not a big notes person. I don't think I should have to read to understand your story. But again, I've read all this stuff, and it's interesting. I think overall the main story itself, they did a really good job on, and I think it's worth playing just for the story alone. I wouldn't say it's going to be Half-Life Alyx tier or anything like that, but it's definitely a good story, and we don't get a lot of story in VR from my experience, but maybe that's because I play a lot of shooters. That being said, there are side stories, and their world building with these side stories, side recordings, and these silhouettes are just amazing. I love it. I wish that there was more detail given to this, but again, these are just side stories. These are just tidbits of information that you gather while you're playing. And if you think that there's something off yonder in some weird corner of the map or corner of a complex that you're in, go explore it. Into the Radius actually rewards you for exploring. More than likely, there's something over there for you to find. And I think that we already know where Into the Radius 2 is taking place, and I may cover that in a separate video, but again, I just love everything about the story and how it actually was delivered, and I'm glad that you're rewarded with bits and pieces for exploring when you are looking for, whether that be making some money, trying to make some money, or just looking for more story information. Overall, the gameplay loop is pretty simple. For the most part, you're going out, doing missions, making sure that while you are out, you survive. That is number one. However, you have main story missions, which level up your security level, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the progression design segment of the video, as well as secondary missions. Now, both of these have payouts because you need money. You're going to need money in this game. Regardless of how you play, you will need money because you need to upkeep your arsenal. There is a lot of mechanics that come into play, whether that be upkeeping your weapon by cleaning it, or having the correct type of ammo, or just having armor and health packs while you're out in the radius. Now, there are a few different types of missions that you will get, and we're going to go ahead and go over each type as well as what you can expect with these missions. So, Paparazzi is a mission that requires you to take pictures of specific types of enemies. I have taken up to 4, I believe, different types of enemies in one go. So these can be easy, or these can be relatively hard. It all depends on the type of enemies that you have to go after. The next type of mission is the Metastasis mission. This is more of a search and destroy type mission where you need to find a spawn rift and bring back the broken crystal from it. Now, with these missions that you need to go out and retrieve something from a specific area, you do need to pay attention to the tide because, again, it resets everything. So if you're halfway through a mission or you get 2 out of the 3 rifts, it doesn't matter. What's going to happen is that tide comes, it's going to reset, and then you have to do all 3 all over again. So make sure you're paying attention to where these are and where that tide is when you are playing. The next mission type is Sample Carrier. This is a search mission where you need to find an eliminated scientist that has pretty much died in the radius and bring back his research that he found. There are bodies littered around the radius that are in bright orange hazard suits or hazmat suits, whatever you want to call them, that will have these samples on them 9 out of 10 times. However, there are some samples out in the world that are not related to missions that you will find as well. So exploring, again, is coming in handy and being rewarded. The next type of mission is Radius Treasure, Banshee Hunter, and In and Out. These are all pretty much the same type of mission, and they require you to get a specific type of artifact from a point marked on your map. Again, that tide timer plays a part in this quest, so if you've only gotten 1 out of the few that you need, and the tide comes, you are going to lose that progress. Now, Operation Cleanup is one of those ones that you can have a lot of fun, or you can not have a lot of fun. This is where you are sent to a particular spot on one of the destinations in the radius to eliminate a group of enemies to that specific area of the map. And as you progress through these missions, they do become harder and harder. So you will get to a point where hopefully you have the right type of ammo to take out this convoy that you're about to run up on to be able to complete Operation Cleanup missions. Papers Drive Me Crazy is similar to the Sample Carrier type missions. However, with this, you need to go out and find documents that were left around by researchers. So when you go out to do these, usually they are well guarded, just like the Sample Carrier mission. Marauder is another type of mission where you have to travel into an anomalous zone. However, when you travel into this anomalous zone, you're not there for artifacts. However, you should definitely get them while you're there, because free money. But you are there because someone else has entered that anomalous zone trying to get the artifacts and made a wrong move. So you are there for asset recovery by obtaining the watch that they left behind when they died in the radius. And our very last mission type is Warren's Legacy. These are black box retrieval missions. So there are a few different ones of these. There's a main mission that's similar to this that require you to go in and obtain a pretty big box. You can't put this in your backpack. You have to carry it in your hands. And these are big missions and pretty deep story missions when it comes to understanding the story of Into the Radius. Now, a lot of this gameplay loop may kind of sound similar, and yes, it is. However, while you're doing the looting, the exploring, upgrading, and then heading back out, you're getting random encounters throughout this entire time. You're not always having the same type of enemies spawn in the same type of areas. You're not always getting the same type of loot from these areas. And the randomness that you get from going out is very well done when it comes to having a fresh feeling every time you do enter the radius, and I feel like it definitely adds a bit of depth, and it doesn't feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over, even if I am just going out to get artifacts or going out to eliminate a convoy of enemies. So let's talk character progression. You're given main missions that will up your security level. However, you're not given these in immediate order. There are missions in between each of these main missions that will be required to be done prior to you obtaining an additional security level, as well as sometimes there are multiple main missions that you need to complete before you're able to obtain your next security level. Now, for me, I think the security level design is warranted and actually really well done, because as you'll see as we talk about each security level, you'll notice a pattern of tension and triumph between each of these levels. And I think overall they did a very good job at balancing the leveling within this game to offer difficulty and then a feeling of power throughout your entire campaign of Into the Radius. Now, let's talk about security level 1. You are very weak and under a lot of duress when you are using the PM pistol, which is your starter pistol. It only has 8 shots. Everything takes about 2 to 3 bullets on average to take out. And when there's more than one enemy, you are super stressed, super worried, and probably at this point under some of the highest tension you will have during your playthrough of Into the Radius. But the tension does not peak here, and I can guarantee that for you. So don't worry, this is not going to be the only time that you are absolutely freaked out about what is going on around you. You will be having this feeling pretty much your entire playthrough. So after you officially get security level 1, you kind of go through basic training. They teach you about the weapon upkeep, as well as you understanding different types of anomalies and the artifacts. Now, for the most part, this is pretty cut and dry, and you only get 2 of these. You get one of these at level 1 security, and at the end when you first get level 2 security, you get kind of advanced training. There's only 2 training sessions. You're able to go in and do these as many times as you want, but they are officially required for you to complete after security level 1 and security level 2 are obtained respectively. Now, after I got security level 2, the game became quite a bit easier. I got my advanced training session, which goes over armor, the mechanics of additional types of weapons that aren't just pistols, and the different types of stealth that I'll kind of be doing for the most part. Now, I think they did a great job. I think these requirements for training probably made my life a little bit easier, and will make a lot of people's lives a little bit easier because they'll understand the cone visuals of enemies, as well as understanding that, yes, you can stealth in this game. That is part of the mechanics. Now, I will say, after obtaining level 2, I was on easy street. I would just run around anywhere. Didn't matter to me. I would go in, guns a-blazing, bang, bang, bang. I got an OC-33 pistol with 18 round magazines. What do I care? That's an additional 10 bullets on top of the PM pistol that I was just running. So, for me, I was living life on easy street. I started to worry that the game was becoming too easy and that it had already peaked at security level 1. But I was sadly, well, I wouldn't say I was sad about it. I was surprisingly mistaken. And security level 3 threw me right back into the deep stress state that I had in level 1, and panic really started to set in. Now, what surprised me, and I was pleasantly surprised by this, is that the game started to get hard again. I got stressed, I was under a lot of pressure, and I didn't know that I was going to be running into enemies with armor to be able to actually even obtain security level 3. Now, AP rounds are unlocked at security level 2, however, I did not expect that I was going to need them this soon. So when I went in to get security level 3 and I noticed that I'm fighting enemies with armor, it threw me off in a way that made me feel like I was using my PM pistol all over again. Instead of those 3 or 4 shots like I was doing, it was getting anywhere from 8 to 12 bullets unless I was hitting heads on certain enemies. Now, for me, this is great. I love when a game gets you into a false sense of security and then throws you right back into the deep end. It's very hard to do, but I think that overall, CM did a great job at making you feel like you were safe at some point in time, and then showing you that there is, in fact, more dangers to be discovered. So, Security Level 4 introduces a new 2-tiered mission, which requires you to essentially get a piece of equipment to be able to completely finish and grab the final objective that you need for this mission. And depending upon how you play, this could be introducing a new mechanic to you, which is having to carry the black box, essentially, out all the way to headquarters. Now, this was not my first time having to deal with this. However, I know that there are people that may not do Warren's Legacy before this and get to this mission and be kind of surprised, so I wanted to make sure that I mentioned it here. Now, for me, I messed up and had to do this 2 times. I went out, got a piece of equipment, realized the tide was coming soon, and I didn't have enough time, so I took that piece of equipment back to headquarters, so I didn't have to do the first half again, and then I went ahead and completed it after the tide rolled through. Now, this unfortunately made it a little bit harder for me, because as you know, everything resets. Loot resets, which is awesome, that's great, but all the enemies reset, and it is no fun doing this mission because there is no close exfil to where this mission is. You essentially need to go across an entire map. Now, that being said, I think that Security Level 4 really gets to the point where you are still very stressed because of how hard and difficult this first mission is with the amount of enemies, but it unlocks dado weapons. So I got an ASVAL, and the VSS was also unlocked, and these have built-in suppressors, which are amazing. They use 9x39, and I love these weapons. However, I do think that the actual difficulty for this was on me, unfortunately, because I decided for some reason that not having armor was the way to go. I just guess I completely neglected to think about it. However, even returning to these areas with armor can be relatively difficult if you are not paying attention. So after security level 3, after you get security level 3, the game stays relatively stressful. You really only feel like John Wick when you are in security level 2. The mission that you need to complete to obtain security level 5 is no joke probably one of the most stressful missions, as there are a lot of curveballs that are going to be left unsaid, but you will hear these curveballs. And the quest itself brought a unique twist near the end that I did not expect, and for sure haunted me while I was doing it and after. This was a pleasant surprise from the devs and a welcome challenge that, when you get down to it, really forced me into the stealth element of Into the Radius. And luckily the devs knew that this mission was a lot more difficult to complete, so they didn't punish you if you didn't have all the materials that you need. All these materials can actually be found within the proximity of the final part of this mission. So I feel like the devs 100% knew that people were sometimes going to do this at the end when the tide was about to come in, and I have to praise that decision. Great look by the devs, and really thinking about how people are really going to play this mission, or at least how it could potentially play out for some players. So Into the Radius's world design is something similar to The Walking Dead. However, instead of going to a region and then coming back to then go to a different region, you can actually travel through every single region in succession if you really wanted to. There are 3 different connections back to headquarters within different regions, but not all regions out of the 5 that you will visit offer these direct links to headquarters. So do keep that in mind, and that is something that also adds to that stress of you being in this world. Now, one thing that was really awesome that I noticed that I haven't really seen in any other game that I've played that offers snipers is sniping feels like you are sniping. You can have a very long distance range and visual sight on enemies, unlike Sniper Elite and other games along those lines that really have those snipers in them. This, I feel like you can snipe from 200-300 meters away, and it feels good and looks good. And I think a lot of people need to take a page out of CM Games playbook and look back at how they managed to get this massive LOD and draw distance. Because pretty much you can see across the map unless there's fog, which has been created so that you don't have that ease of access. Now, let's talk about some of these points of interest. There is massive amounts of diversity here. There's factories, there's train stations, there's castles. There's a whole bunch in this game that realistically offer just such a unique experience every time you go out and explore. And when you're completing objectives or looting, like I said earlier in the video, you are definitely rewarded for exploring. You can even go out just to explore if you want to, and the game even encourages this and tells you that you can do this. The interiors of buildings are well thought out, and the way that loot is placed within these feels like the world is actually being lived in by somebody. And it doesn't feel like this all is just here in a way that makes it easy for programmers to say, look, you're looting. There was a lot of time and dedication put into the level design and the building design as well, I feel like, from CM Games. Now, the sound is definitely a part of your world design, and it is very important, and I think CM Games hits the nail on the head. The sound in the world really helps set the stage that you're not supposed to be here. And the day and night cycle offer completely different feelings to every single location, especially when you're not comfortable with them completely. Hearing something at night, even if it's something or a sound that you've heard before, it's still going to fill you with dread because you can't see very well. There is not night vision in this game like you think there is. Now, there are mechanics to mitigate this, but we will talk about that a little bit later in the video. And unlike a lot of games that enemies are more aggro or plentiful or stronger at night, CM Games knew that all they needed to do to get under your skin is a fear that's been around since the beginning of time. And that fear is darkness. Pitch black darkness. Now, I've never wanted to be out at night, but if I was out at night, I hope that I had my supplies in order, because if I got caught with the sun going down and overweight, I just wanted to throw everything and run. However, Into the Radius offers safe houses. So luckily, as long as the tide timer is not super close, you should be able to sleep at one of these safe houses that are pre-marked on your map and be able to get back to the daytime, if that makes sense. Again, CM Games doesn't make the game any harder, it just definitely adds a lot more stress, tension, and worry. Now, maybe I'm a masochist for saying this, but I do wish that CM Games didn't necessarily give you the option to already see these safe houses on the map. I think that it's something that should have been discovered. However, it could just be me, and in the end, it all comes down to how prepared you are anyway, because, yeah, you can get to a safe house and make it daytime, but if you don't have any bullets or anything like that, you're still going to be screwed. When it comes to the weapons for Into the Radius, there are no lack of options. The weapons that you would find in this game are just like most VR shooters, and they offer 11 different calibers. Altogether, there are 26 weapons, not including knives or grenades, and the only type that you're not going to find in this game are going to be things like RPGs, rockets, or bows. The feeling of the weapons overall is great, even if you're not using virtual stock. The movement feels fluid, as well as the weight on the weapons is noticeable, but it does not feel like it's hindering you at all. Compared to something like Walking Dead Saints and Sinners that has your gun kind of feeling front heavy, Into the Radius doesn't have that issue, and it really puts an emphasis on how you would actually hold the weapon. And you're not going to droop your pistol down front heavy if you don't have a second hand on it. You're not going to do that. You're going to compensate for that. So this game definitely does weapons right. Now, another very cool thing that CM Games did is they offered a half eject feature for your pistol magazines. And what this does is hopefully stops you from just dropping that magazine on the ground when you're panicked and then losing it. Essentially, what it offers is the ability to half eject it and pull it out to be able to place a new one in, which is awesome, and I am thoroughly enjoying the unique mechanics that CM Games have been offering throughout my playthrough of Into the Radius. Another realistic thing that they did, it's funny, it's kind of annoying, but it is realistic, so I'm not going to hold it against them, is the weapon safety. Now, every weapon that you either buy or find in the Radius is going to start with the safety on. And I died to this too often. Even after 10 hours of playing, I died to it more than I would like to admit. Since we're talking about weapon mechanics, I want to talk about the weapon cleaning. Essentially, you're supposed to clean the outside of your weapon as well as the barrel of the weapon, and this upkeep adds definitely another level of stress, but it is a realistic mechanic that, in the end, is very important because this keeps your weapon from jamming or misfiring. You also need to keep your mags upkept as well, and your suppressors. However, unlike the magazines or the weapon itself, the suppressor needs to be repaired inside of the repair station. You are unable to repair this yourself by cleaning it with the weapon cleaning mechanic. Now, overall, this mechanic does fit very well into the game, and again, offers that level of stress. This is something similar to the Fallout series with Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, where if your weapon durability went too low, your weapon eventually broke. Now, I didn't have any guns completely break on me, but again, if you do not follow this closely, you will be SOL. Another thing is that even if your weapon's upkept, if you don't upkeep your suppressor in the same way, you could find yourself in the middle of a base being surrounded by enemies, all because you decided that instead of upgrading or upkeeping your suppressor, you wanted to just go back in as quickly as possible. And now your next shot is going to ring loud. When you move on to getting your first rifle, the game overall doesn't change too much, but you do get that sense of safety and power because of the distance that you can now engage your targets at. However, I did get my first rifle at level 3 security, and since I got it that late into the game, essentially I had to put a lot of money into AP rounds, which are not cheap depending upon the caliber that you use. Now, if you're not that accurate, rifles and snipers are on offer to have a mechanic that will slow down your sway, if that makes sense. So your natural sway that you have in your hands, it will slow that down. It will make it so that when you ADS and you press the hold breath button, your controllers are not being tracked for small movements. They're only being tracked really for major movement. So I think a lot of people can take this page out of CM Games playbook and implement this if they're going to have snipers in their game, because overall this is the first time that I've personally seen it, but I think it is a great mechanic that will encourage more people to snipe in multiplayer games as well as single player games, as long as they're obviously not sniper focused, because then you have to snipe anyway. But I see a lot of people opting not to get snipers because of how much sway some people's hands naturally have. So offering something like this is a great idea, and I think a lot of planning was put into this, and I commend CM Games for that. By the end of the game, my build was an M9, ASVAL, and DVL-10. I would keep my sniper on my back with a 30-round box of AP and an extra magazine. I was unable to try everything in the game, but the overall feeling of having a full stealth character by the end of it all just made me feel like a one-man army that was impossible to take down. And I later found out that was a lie, because, again, an enemy that I will not be talking about, you will run into and have a very interesting time dealing with. So to wrap up weapons, CM Games has done a great job visually and mechanically on the weapons, adding depth and variety to the playstyles as well as how you loot. The design and attention to detail that are put into these weapons are top tier, and I hope just as much effort is put into their next game, because I was just blown away. And again, CM Games, you've done a great job on accuracy as well as the mechanics and feel of these weapons when it comes to a VR shooter. Now, this will be one of our shorter sections because there's not a lot to talk about, at least for the artifacts. I won't be going into hard detail on the anomalies either, as some of those you just need to experience for yourself to feel that true dread. But the artifacts are found within anomaly fields, and most of them are quest focused or usually just to make a good bit of money, and there are only really 3 that you need to actually care about. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a way to mitigate darkness, and that's with a special artifact called Night Eye. This will give you something similar to night vision and overall helps when you are stuck out at night and trying to avoid enemies in the dark. The next artifact is called Steps, and this is essentially just a breadcrumb trail artifact where after you activate it, as you walk, it will leave a trail of steps behind you. Now, personally, I didn't really need this. I don't know why it's in the game, honestly. But hey, sometimes people get lost. Our last one that you need to worry about is the regen artifact, which in my opinion is in fact the most useful artifact because it offers the ability to heal you. And I found myself a lot of the times running out of meds in the field, not bringing enough out, but I had a regen, or I found a regen in an anomaly field, and it saved me because, again, I ran out of meds because of my stupidity of not getting armor until late game. Now, like I said, the rest of the artifacts are just to sell, and they're found usually in groups of up to 3 in each anomaly field. So navigating these fields are 110% worth it, even if you are going out of your way or it's not a quest for you to get one, as long as the tide has come and you haven't been in that anomaly field yet, you're going to find at least one artifact in it, which is well worth the time and money to get the artifacts out of those anomaly fields. Now, let's talk about the few anomalies I want to kind of get off the table. The first one being the reflector anomaly. This is going to be the one that you're going to see the most. This is essentially anytime you get within range of the reflector anomaly, you will be pushed back. Now, these are easy to maneuver. You just throw your bullets, or your bullet casings, I should say, at them from your little bullet casing pouch, and they will pop up. Those are going to be what you see most, and that's going to be what most anomaly fields are covered in. You'll also see a lot of haze anomalies, and these are where you need your gas mask. So keep in mind when you're going out to bring your gas mask. The next one that you're going to see in a lot of these fields is the shock anomaly, and you're going to hear my notes on this a little bit later in the video, but the shock anomaly essentially shocks you, does exactly what it says, but it also makes you drop your weapon. And I don't think that should be happening the way that it does, and again, you will hear about that a little bit later in the video. There is also the black grass anomaly, and this is pretty much what I say it is. It's black grass, but you shine your light on it, and it retracts, essentially, as long as it has light on it. There are 3 others that I have not named for a total of 7 different types of anomalies, not including anomalous items, that you will encounter while you play Into the Radius. Most of these are easily avoidable. However, some of them can really freak you out if you don't know what they are. Now let's talk about the enemy design of Into the Radius. There are 7 different enemy types. However, there are more if you want to include each variant of those enemies. Now, I will be excluding one of these because I did, again, talk about it earlier, that I want you to have the full experience of this other final enemy that you're going to encounter and really get that feeling of, holy crap, what is that? So our first enemy that you're going to be encountering is the Fragment. This is your overall standard type of humanoid enemy that is probably going to be the easiest for you to take out just because of how loud it is, and it's pretty much unable to sneak up on you for all intents and purposes. However, you can become pretty overwhelmed in a group, and when you take these out, you do need to also take out an orb that starts floating that looks kind of like the Radius, believe it or not. And this orb essentially confirms that they are down and out. Essentially a double tap, if you will. You can either shoot or knife this if you would like. Next enemy is Phantoms. These are similar to Fragments when it comes to shape. However, the biggest difference is they are pretty transparent. So you have to really keep your eye out from these. They are still just as loud, and I think the worst time to really be dealing with an enemy like this is at night. But the good thing about these is that they do not have orbs and are probably the easiest enemies to take out when it comes to the entirety of Into the Radius. The third most common enemy you're going to be seeing is what appears to look like a rolling spider. Now, although I have owned tarantulas in the past, I am not a big spider person myself, but the spawn, which again is similar to kind of like a rolling spider or a somersaulting spider that you would see in the desert, is a jumping enemy. And this thing is fast. However, they are very easy to dodge, and usually you can take them out in 2 shots or fewer. While they do have some sort of attack pattern, you will more than likely get hit by these. But after they jump, it takes them about 2 to 3 seconds to start moving again. So that is pretty much your chance to take out these guys. And they're loud. You're going to hear them from a mile away. They're probably the loudest enemy in the entire game. So you know when they are coming and you know where they're coming from. So you definitely have a lot of time to line up those shots and take them. Seekers are one enemy that you do not want them to see you first because they are completely silent. They full speed run without making a sound. And worst of all, they eye blast you like Cyclops from X-Men. So for me, when I deal with these enemies, I gotta make sure that I see them from a distance, because when they start running, they definitely are hauling it. They are Olympic sprinters at this point. And since they make no sound whatsoever until they are right up on top of you, if you don't look around for your surroundings before you are entering a building or entering a field or anything like that, you are definitely going to have a hard time with these guys, because when you get distracted by another mob or another group of enemies, these are going to be the ones that are going to come out of the trees or, you know, a mile away that say, oh, I hear a fight over here, let's go gank and third party. That is what Seekers are for all intents and purposes in Into the Radius. Now, Mimics are going to be the first distance damage enemies that you see. They essentially have weapons, but they never drop anything, and they never, you know, weapons, ammo, nothing. Nothing ever drops from them, unfortunately. So don't expect to be taking them out and using 10 bullets per, and then expecting to get anything out of it. You don't get anything out of it except your life. That's about it. Now, these carry anywhere from pistols all the way up to sniper rifles, depending upon the mimic type. They have cop mimics, as well as commando and sniper mimics. So for these, usually I recommend taking them out of the distance, just because although their aim is pretty good, it's usually kind of hard to sneak up on them before they notice you. So that being said, probably not the hardest enemy, but is definitely going to be one of those ones that'll give you a hard time and take out a lot of your health if you like. Now on to the worst enemy you're going to encounter, the sliders. And no, these are not the cheeseburgers you see on the appetizer menu at Chili's. These little bundles of joy teleport right on top of you. They do make a sound when they teleport, but they are hard to kill and kill you very quickly unless you have armor. But even with armor, they can take you out in just a few hits if you are ill prepared. For this, I recommend headshots with a fully auto weapon or a shotgun, since they like to get close up and kiss you on the mouth. Your first encounter with these will for sure be the worst, but they don't stay hard the entire time, and when they are in groups, that is when they are the hardest, because of how much health they truly have, even without armor. So this is the final enemy that I really want you to kind of experience it for yourself. You are going to have to watch out for it, because the only thing that you're really able to do is use smoke, which will break line of sight. Other than that, it's not going to be a fun time. You can take this enemy out, but it takes a lot of munitions to do so. So you need to make sure that you're aware of what's going on when you are around this enemy, because one fatal move will definitely cost you your life, and quickly, even if you have armor. Now, if you've watched any of my previous reviews, you know how important it is to me to have accessibility options, and there are some that Into the Radius offers, so we're going to go through those. But again, accessibility to me is very, very important in gaming. It's not something that I need, but I know that there are people out there that will enjoy VR that will need accessibility options. So I do think it is very important that we highlight these and tell what the game offers. The first option that they offer is seated mode. Now, for me, the seated mode is like any other seated mode. However, the distance for grabbing items off your body can be an issue. I do have arms on my chair, so I did only use seated mode when I was in the safe zone, just because I needed to take a break after, you know, an hour and a half of standing when I go out on a run. Now, I do think that they need to be a little bit more forgiving at the distance that you can grab like a pistol out of its holster off of your body, but that is up to them. However, my armrests were constantly blocking my ability to grab that pistol off of my hip, and made it so I kind of had to reach around to grab it. So with that, I think that just needs a little bit of improvement in my eyes, and I hope that they do improve that in the next game. Now, another feature that a lot of VR games offer is distance grabbing, and I think that this is something that probably needs to be implemented in about 90% of VR games. I don't think it needs to be in every single one, but again, it's something that is still important. Not everybody can bend down, even if they are crouched. Not everybody can necessarily reach the ground when they're, crouched in game with a crouch button, which again is a feature that they offer. But the distance grab in this is really cool because they actually want you to use trigger and grab or grip at the same time. It's not just grabbing. So you can't make that mistake of grabbing something at a distance when you're trying to open a drawer, which I think they did a really good job on for at least what I've seen, because I have had games where I've tried to grab, but I've distance grabbed before, because it's only the grab button that is doing that. So for me, I think that this is a good addition, and I think that, again, 90% of games really need to have this in it for just that accessibility. Now, I mentioned earlier that scope feature. I'm going to also count this as accessibility, because overall, there are people that have a pretty generous amount of hand jitter, and I think that this will help a lot of people with their rifles as well as their snipers, and I'm kind of disappointed that it doesn't work on the pistols, but I understand why it doesn't work on the pistols, because for them, it doesn't seem like a massive realistic thing when it comes to pistols. Not a lot of people, I think, are holding their breath when they're shooting their pistols, but again, I don't shoot a lot of guns IRL, so I don't know what a lot of people do with their pistols, but I do think, and I will include, that the scope feature that slows down the hand tracking is a great addition for accessibility. Another part of my reviews that I just started recently doing is it VR? Is it a game that thought of VR late, or did this have a VR focus in mind? And for me, I have to say, Into the Radius is one of those games that 100% went in and said, we are making this VR the way that VR needs to be made. Because there are items that don't have any value, I can't really do anything with them, but I can pick them up, I can interact with the world. It feels lived in. It's not something that I can just go into and say, oh, look, a picture, and then not be able to pick it up. I can pick up those pictures. I can maneuver items within the world around. Now, can I, slap bushes and stuff like that and those move? No. It's not Half-Life Alyx levels of interaction with the world, because there are certain things that I'm not able to pick up. But again, I give this a solid 9 when it comes to interactability and the scale of which it is VR immersion at its finest. So for me, I think if you are someone that says, I want a VR game that feels like I'm living in the world, Into the Radius offers that. Into the Radius does a great job making you feel like you are someone in this world because of the amount of interaction that adds to the immersion of the VR experience and the VR medium as a whole. Now, I've gotten through most of what I wanted to talk about, but I do want to talk about my annoyances and issues. So, the first thing that they really need to pay attention to in the next game is the footstep audio design, because it is way off. It seems like they just added a loop for the audio, and regardless of what speed you're moving at, you are getting the same audio track. I could be stealthily walking, obviously standing up, walking, and I would get the same track of audio as if I was running.
Snacks coming out to play?
Now, I don't think that that's good sound design, and I think that the spatial audio that's coming to the Quest is going to add a lot. But again, I do hope that they take the time to have different audio for your footstep strides, because again, hearing the same audio track over and over is not great. Another issue I had with this is that whether I looked left or right, it all sounded the same. So if I moved sideways and was looking to the right as I was moving, it still sounded absolutely the same, and it didn't have any directional audio whatsoever. So I think that we need to have a massive improvement on at least the player's footsteps from that standpoint. This next critique may just be a skill issue, but I found when I was trying to grab my backpack, I would grab items off my lapel or my wrists a lot, and I don't know why this was. Definitely got me killed more than a few times, and I think that there needs to be some way to kind of understand, or at least have the game understand, that I'm trying to grab the backpack. Again, I'm kind of 50-50 on this. It may be a skill issue, and it may even be that I used full body IK instead of just hands. Not 100%, but definitely one of those things that got me killed quite a bit. Earlier, I talked about the shock anomaly and how I had some gripes with it that I would cover later. This is my coverage of my issues with the shock anomaly. The worst part of this thing is not that it hits you constantly. It has a cooldown that you can kind of work around. However, it's only really 5 seconds, 6 seconds, and I don't think that's enough for the issue that I have, because if it hits you enough, you will drop your weapon. That weapon then cannot be picked up with the distance grab. Now, more than likely, this was designed around the thought process of, you got hit by this quite a few times, here's your punishment, but this hurts accessibility, and I think ruins the experience of having that distance grab feature, because if I get hit with this a few times, I have to go over there, crouch down, grab it, and then hopefully not get hit within that amount of time. So for me personally, I think that that should be changed in the next game to where, yes, it hits me, and maybe when it hits me the third time, it hurts a little bit more, or my weapon, you know, drops. Great, but still let me do the distance grab, because the accessibility that is offered with that distance grab is a much needed feature for many players. The next thing is our repair menu. Now, I want to be able to select bits and pieces of a weapon that I want to repair, just because I don't want to have to go into the dress menu every single time to take my suppressor and my sight off. I want to be able to just throw my gun in the repair, click, hey, I want to repair my suppressor, hey, I want to repair my sight, and those are the only two things that I want to repair on this. I don't want to pay the $800 it's going to take to repair my entire weapon. So in the next game, please make it so that I can just select what I want to repair, so I don't have to repair the entire weapon, and it'll make it so I can actually still do the repair at my weapon station, even if I don't do it there first. Because, as you know, after a raid, you're going straight to the bus. You're not going to your workbench. You're going straight to the bus. So let me get everything I need to do done in the bus at once without needing to go into the dress mode and take the attachments off my weapon. Just me, minor annoyance, not a game-ending feature or game-killing feature, but still something that should be implemented nonetheless. Another annoyance was the binds to turn on the laser and the flashlight. I don't know why it was a button that required me to stop being able to move or look around, but it was kind of annoying doing a button press that way. Just change it so that it's the non-dominant hand trigger. Every single weapon has a two-handed mode. Just make it so I use whatever my non-dominant hand's trigger is to turn on and off that laser or flashlight. It'll just be a lot easier and be a lot more intuitive in my eyes. And my final critique is the weapon cleaning. I think overall it is probably one of the most annoying mechanics when it comes to how it's done, only because it seems random. I think the mechanic overall is very cool and very in-depth, but cleaning the weapon overall is annoying because I don't know where this dirt is, and maybe I'm just blind. Maybe I needed to explain to me a little bit more in depth on, hey, look for these little tiny spots. That's what you need to get off of your weapon to, make sure it's clean. Make it something kind of like Power Wash Sim, where you just highlight them with just a small amount of flash. Just something. Because I don't want to sit there for 3 minutes trying to go from yellow to blue just on one little tiny piece that I cannot find. So please, in the future, change it. Just make it so it's highlighted, blinking just a little bit. Even if it's not like some radiant color, if it's just like an a brighter gray, something that makes it so it's easily noticeable for all your players to see, that would 100% improve my experience with the weapon cleaning. In conclusion, Into the Radius is probably my game of the year for me personally, just because I obviously didn't play it when it released, and I will 110% be covering the second one. This game gets a 9 out of 10 for me, just based on how in-depth and how really well thought out everything was in the game. Again, I did have a few minor annoyances, but nothing that was going to force me to stop playing. The first session that I had in this game was 6 hours long. The only other game that has done that to me has been Half-Life Alyx. And I was just blown away by everything in this game. And when I went to the Discord, everyone was super welcoming. And it seems like 5+ hours is a canon event for most people when it comes to playing Into the Radius. So if you are someone that loves in-depth VR, loves kind of psychological horror, and really enjoys the mechanics of, weapons in VR, as well as looting, Into the Radius is definitely going to be a game that you're going to want to put at the top of your playlist before Into the Radius 2 comes out. So that being said, I do want to thank everybody that took the time to watch this almost hour-long review and made it to the end. You are the real OGs of the channel, and hopefully by the time we hit, 1 million subscribers, you'll be one of the first few that were here since the beginning. That being said, my name is Buttersomething. I want to thank all of you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, especially if you've made it this far. And I'll see you all in the next video.